it's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story Podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hello, and it's Ivy Slater with another episode of Her Success Story. Today, I have an amazing guest, and yes, all of our guests are amazing. But I had the pleasure of meeting this guest at an event for Dress for Success that, as the followers and our subscribers know, is a huge passion of mine. Gretchen Carlson was a speaker. She shared her book with us, Be Fierce, that day. And I really admired what she's doing for the women in the world. I went home, I immediately grabbed the book, started reading, and I said, I resonate. I want, and I went up to Gretchen that day and I said, I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to have you on the podcast because your stories about real women really resonate with me. She's a graduate of Stanford University. She's one of the most influential voices in the Me Too movement, has been lobbying for Congress to enact laws to prohibit forced arbitration clauses in employment contracts. She has gone on to start foundations. She has the Gretchen has established the Gift of Courage Fund, and it's the Gift of Courage Fund, which provides financial grants to organizations that empower girls and boys, as well as the Gretchen Carlson Leadership Initiative. That's what attracted me to Gretchen that day, is a woman who has had her own journey and is making the difference for the future of women out there and our children out there. Gretchen, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for listing all the work that I've been doing over the last couple of years. Could have never envisioned that it would have all turned out this way when I made the decision to file my own harassment suit.
So your background, you're a journalist, you built a career in journalism, and that's not an easier career to build in this day, in this day and age. So hats off to you.
Well, and especially when I was starting out, because it was not, there's really not a roadmap to becoming a journalist who makes it to New York City and eventually gets onto a network. If there was like an easy way to do it, then I think there would be so many more people attempting or getting to those positions. And the business has really changed dramatically since I started 30 years ago. But I did it the old-fashioned way. I went to Stanford, as you mentioned. I was actually going to be a lawyer, and my life story actually about any success is how my life has worked in mysterious ways, and I've gone in so many different directions. And I think it's a really important message for people who, don't know exactly what they want to do in their life at any point in time, and they feel like they've missed their chance. Just look at my life to figure out that, I've had a lot of curves in the road and changed course a million times. So early on in my life, I was going to be a lawyer. Before that, I was going to be a musician. I was a very serious classical violinist as a child. Didn't do that, didn't become a lawyer, ended up in TV. And so I really started just the old-fashioned way, working my way up. I spent 2 years in Richmond, Virginia, working at a local station there, then Cincinnati, then Cleveland, then Dallas. Then I eventually made it to New York City to work for CBS News, and then eventually moved down the street to Fox News for 11 years. So I really worked my way up. And the interesting thing is that I'm really glad that I had all that experience, because later on in my career, when I had made it to a certain position, I really realized that I had done all of the jobs that every other person was doing to make my show, go off without a hitch every day. And so I had been the grunt reporter out in the field. I had edited all my own stories. I had written all my own stories. I had known how much hard work photographers put into the day. So it gave me this immense experience level, but also appreciation for how much of it was teamwork. And that even though I might be the person in front of the camera, really there were so many other people that were involved in the whole equation and, making a TV show come off. And I think that's really, really valuable, a valuable lesson even for today, for younger or middle-aged people, that not only is teamwork always important to understand, but that experience, even though it can be sometimes frustrating to pay your dues, I think in the end, it really serves you well, because you don't make some of those junior mistakes that you might later on in your career because you've gone through all the rough patches earlier on.
And one of the things I love that you just alluded to is we, as young people, and I'll just put it that way, as young people, we have all these ideas of what we're going to be when we grow up. And you were you were a violinist. I was a dancer. You were going to be an attorney. I was going to be a producer, actually. And then life evolves and opportunities evolve. And we end up in this journey that I could tell you for myself, looking back 30 years later, I never expected to be doing what I do today. In your journey, what have been some of, the lessons you learned? And some of them you didn't learn the easy way. None of us have, actually.
No, I know. No, so many life lessons along the way. I think that the most important is something so simple, but actually something that women really get hung up on sometimes, and that's this whole idea that we have to make sure that everyone likes us. And one of the biggest pieces of advice that I give to college-aged women or young women coming into the workforce is stop being so nice. It really is how we're socialized and groomed, but it affects us down the road because it doesn't give us the aggressive nature, or even just not even aggressive, just the the courage to even ask for a raise like men do, because we are sort of groomed to just go with the flow and just take a lower salary because we don't want to make any waves. So I think that one of the things that happened to me when I was actually Miss America, which is a whole nother twist in my life, was that, all of a sudden people just didn't like me. And coming from a state of Minnesota where everyone is nice to everyone, I remember calling my dad and I was like, Dad, why do people suddenly just not like me just because? I haven't changed. I'm still Gretchen from small town in Minnesota. And he, as somebody who everyone loved in the world, he said to me, you know what, Gretchen, he said, you got to get past this right now. No matter how hard you try, there are going to be some people in the world that are just not going to like you. And you spend the time on trying to change the minds of those that you think you can, and the others you have to just simply, be able to walk away from and be okay with the fact that you're not going to please everybody. And I think about that advice, as simple as it is, every single day of my life, because I think especially as women, we're constantly battling that in our own minds. Like, we want to be successful, but at the same time, we have to be nice to everyone. And I think it's really important to try and shed the latter thing of what I said, and be okay with sometimes asking for what you want, and standing up for yourself, and having the courage to say something that makes you a little bit nervous, and taking a risk. So that, I think, is the biggest piece of advice that I've received.
I love that. And I'd love to expand on it. So in taking the risk and willing to stand up for your beliefs, yourself, and play in the field of not everybody has to like me, you've gone out and you've just launched your first documentary.
Mm-hmm. Right. So
Breaking the Silence. Now that is, in any time to take that initiative and make things happen, take some guts.
It did. And it also, took some guts on behalf of Lifetime TV, who decided to work with me and air the doc a week ago, because, one of the things that I really wanted to do after I filed my sexual harassment case against the chairman of Fox News was be able to go back to television, because I'd been fired. And I worked myself silly to get to the point where I was, 27 years in the business. And one of the things that happens when you file a lawsuit like that, and thousands of women across the country can attest to this if they've had the courage to come forward, is that they're blacklisted. And they're blacklisted for simply doing nothing wrong except having the courage to be able to say, hey, something's not going right here in the workplace. And so I really wanted to go back to television, and I really wanted to be that beacon of hope for so many other women who have reached out to me who have never been able to go back to their careers, which is a crying shame. But it is, I would say 99.9% of the women who reached out to me have never worked again. And so I wanted to be able to go do that. And Lifetime, took a chance and hired me. And I spent the summer traveling across the country, focusing on the every woman story. A lot of focus in this Me Too movement has been on journalists like myself and Hollywood actresses, but really this is a pervasive epidemic that's happening all across our country with all kinds of women and all different professions. And I wanted to focus on those women who hadn't been given the attention. And so I spent time, meeting with fast food workers and meeting with firefighters and meeting with women who worked in the Department of Veterans Affairs. And we also focused on another Hispanic journalist out in California. And so I'm really, really proud of the work that we did in putting together the 2-hour special. And I'll be doing more work for Lifetime and more documentaries moving forward. But I was just grateful to be given the opportunity to get back into TV.
And give us the full name of the show, because we're out there. It aired last week, and we could catch it on demand. All the women and all the great men out there. This is something to watch. It's something to see what's going on in our country in all industries.
Yeah, so it's called Gretchen Carlson, Breaking the Silence. And it's a 2-hour doc, and again, it features the every woman story, and hopefully has provided inspiration to so many other women to know that their voices matter, and what has happened to them matters. And you bring up something interesting. Men, they're a huge part of this equation, and in order to solve this issue, I have found out over the last 2.5 years that it's a tangled web. It's not just a one silver bullet solution, but we really do need men to help us. And so all the work that I've been doing in this documentary and my book and everything else, it's not saying that men are horrible, and that we don't like them, and that they should be confused about, what's going on in our society right now. Rather, it's that we want to work together with men, because that's the only way we're going to solve this issue. And one of the biggest ways in which men can help us, number one, is hiring more of us, paying us fairly, promoting us, because guess what doesn't happen when you have more women in higher positions? Harassment. And also, we need men to, if they have seen this kind of behavior in their own workplace, to find the same amount of courage that it takes to come forward as a bystander or a witness and support women that they have actually seen this kind of behavior happen to. I know it's really difficult to do, but it's really important that men are, that they join the fight with us on this so that we can try to accomplish it together.
Early on, my background is I spent 20 plus years in the printing industry, built a business. And early on, when I was learning the industry, there were clearly some horrific men, and there were some amazing men.
Right.
And we have a choice of what we're going to tolerate and who we align ourselves with. And in my books, in my speaking, I share both sides of the story, because it's in the good of men that we can learn and make the difference. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. They are 100% part of this equation. And it's for every woman and man to stand up to change our future.
Mm-hmm. And it's why it's so important. Another piece of the puzzle is the way in which we raise our children. And I'm hopeful for the next generations. And by the way, it's why I'm doing all the work that I'm doing, because I have 2 children of my own. I have a 15-year-old daughter and a 13-year-old son. And so I'm seeing it from both sides of the way in which they're looking at the world, gender, I mean. And I obviously don't want this to happen to my daughter in the workplace. And I want my son to be enlightened enough to know what's right and wrong. And so I hope that I've been a shining example for both of them. But also the reason I'm putting so much effort into this is not just for my kids, but for all the children out there, because nobody wants this to be happening to their kids. We thought we had accomplished this, you and I, in our generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we thought, wow, women are so empowered now, and we get all these top-notch jobs, and women are more successful than ever before. And certainly, we had eradicated these ridiculous notions of harassment being pervasive. Well, we hadn't. And I actually believe that one of the reasons that this whole cultural revolution has continued on in full force over the last couple of years is because the American public didn't understand what level we were really talking about here. I think that the American public was stunned to hear some of the most egregious stories that we've heard over the last couple of years. And I think they also believe that we had solved this issue for the most part. And one of the reasons why I've worked so hard on legislation and trying to take this out of the shadows of secrecy with forced arbitration clauses in employment contracts is for that very reason. Because when a company can force you into arbitration and into secrecy, if you happen to come forward and complain about harassment, then nobody ever knows what ever happened to you. And that's why the American public has been misinformed on this issue for the last 2 decades. Because the majority of these kinds of cases are either going to secret arbitration where no one ever hears about them, or they're being settled. You know, my case was settled. And if it hadn't been for the strategy of my lawyers to make my case public, nobody would have ever known about my story. And so I think it's, you know, incredibly important to work on laws and get companies to understand that it's not the right thing to try and hide everything under the carpet anymore, and to honor both men and women in the workplace, and to not shun women who find the courage to come forward, but, you know, stop making them pariahs and actually celebrate them. That would be a whole different way of looking at this issue. And so one of the pieces of the puzzle is to try and get rid of these arbitration clauses. As I've said, solving this issue is a complicated task. It's, you know, it's not just one thing.
It is a complicated task, and my kids are a decade older than yours, so they're now out in the workforce. And I'm seeing, and they're both in big companies, big companies, and I'm seeing them both navigate it. So I have an older daughter and a younger son. My son is working for a woman, and I'm loving following the journey and seeing my daughter is also working for a global company, and it's wonderful to see the journey. And in her case, how their big company is addressing things on a much more with trainings, we're not going to change anything in a day. And I'm truly, you know, it's the mother in me that believes change comes through education. So I'll sound that mother tone of, yes, education is important, children. Yes, education is, guys, yes, you have to do your homework. And the more we educate and we enlighten, the better chance we have of shifting a culture. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to see this business culture shifted.
Yeah, I mean, for us to have come this far in just 2 years is actually pretty remarkable, because if you look at any other kind of societal change, it takes decades.
Right.
So I am optimistic. And like I said, when I've traveled across the country, specifically, I did a college campus tour for my book, Be Fierce. And I was very enlightened to see that there were also almost as many men in the audience, young men as young women. And that signaled to me that in that generation that they actually want to hear about this and learn about it and try to fix it. So, you know, so that was positive. With that being said, you know, I think there are some companies out there that feel like this is just a trend and it's going to go away, so they don't really have to do any homework, or they don't have to do any work. And I think that that's short-sighted, because we have seen that workers they're becoming more empowered. I mean, just look at what happened at the Google walkout.
Right.
And, you know, I'm proud to say that after that walkout, Google decided to take forced arbitration clauses out of their employment contracts. So nice. It goes to show that, you know, workers do have a voice, and that's what I've been preaching a lot about over the last couple of years, is that you may feel all alone, but actually when you come together, you know, it's a very strong, powerful message and voice. And so I've been encouraging women to tell their stories all across the country, but to also come together in the workforce to make it a safer and better place for everyone.
So I'm really curious to ask you, in the last 2.5 years, as you've taken on this next step in your journey, what are some of the surprises that have come your way?
Wow. Well, I mean, I guess you would have to say that my initial action of filing a lawsuit, I had no idea what the consequences would be. So not only did that, you know, that was a huge jump off a cliff for me, but also, you know, not knowing at all what was below. I could have never envisioned that we would be doing this podcast right now. that we would be having a discussion about this 2.5 years later, that there'd be this movement, that anyone would have paid any attention to it. I mean, I knew that for sure I was going to be called a lot of names and called a liar and, all the other myths that are associated with the harassment issue, unfortunately. But I didn't have any way of knowing that it could have in any way turned out to be positive. And so, for that, I'm grateful every day. Having said that, it's not like, I wake up every morning and say, wow, I'm so excited that I'm one of the poster children for, for sexual harassment in the workplace. That's like, speaking of living your life in mysterious ways and changing course, that's not something that I ever expected to have on my resume. So, it's a testament, I think, to being a gutsy, courageous little girl, where I always spoke up for myself and, somehow dug deep to find that courage to do what I did. And then also just that I had a life of experience of twists and turns. And I think that was just crucial in me being able to get through this latest phase in my life, that I've had to pick myself up before and change course. And that's what I've done over the last 2.5 years. And every day it's something new and it's a new challenge. And, the one constant in my life has been that if there is something hard in front of me or a challenge, I have a tendency to want to go for it. And so, I think that put me in the right direction for this.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in there and say you were trained for that. Being a dedicated artist in any fashion or a dedicated athlete in any fashion,
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a violinist, a vocalist, a baseball player, whatever, if it's art, if it's theater, if it's dance, if it's baseball, hockey, football, whatever it is, there's a dedication that we're brought up with. And when if it was some tough notes in a piece that we needed to conquer, I'm going to probably bet it didn't matter how much your hands hurt, you were going to go for it.
Right. And I think that when you're, well, I think it's a combination of innate sort of fire in your belly. So I do think some of it is the way in which we're constituted when we're born. But then also, the training and the immense discipline. So, a lot of times people would say to me, well, what does playing the violin so seriously as a kid have anything to do with how you ended up in television? And I said, it's exactly almost the same thing in a weird way. Because the discipline that I learned from all those hours of practicing as a kid, 4 or 5 hours a day, it taught me my life skills for the rest of the journey. In other words, I learned that when you put any amount of time into something, you got better at it. And it taught me how to manage my time, how to work hard at absolutely everything that I approached. And from the performance side, going out on stage and performing was exactly like when the red light came on the camera for television. It was that same feeling of, okay, I've prepared for this, I'm ready for it, and now I'm out on stage. And so there were a lot of similarities, not only from the discipline side of things, but even from the performance side of things that were similar between music and a career in television.
I agree wholeheartedly. Let me ask you this, Gretchen. You're a woman on the move. You've started nonprofits. You're just launched your documentary. You wrote a book. You've taken all your experience and your knowledge to make a difference and change, and make a change and make a commitment to it. As a busy woman, and I like to ask this of the mothers I interview, of how do we manage to stay involved in it all, in building our careers, making the difference we want to make, and having that and creating the time for your family? Any tips or advice to other women out there?
Yes, stop beating yourself up. That would be my number one piece of advice. Because you never hear anyone say to a man, oh, he has it all, right? I mean, he can have it all. Like we say to women can have it all now. Well, okay, I guess men are just expected to go to work and also have kids. And that's fine. But I think it's actually a curse to put that sort of a responsibility on women and make us feel guilty for no reason. There's all these studies out there that show that women who work actually have just as successful children, if not more, than women who don't. So that's number one. And I think to each their own. You know, so I don't lay blame on any woman or man for wanting to work, you know, working, not working, whatever. But I believe for myself that I'm a better mom because I work. And the one way in which I feel okay about that is that when I'm working, I'm giving 100% to my work. But then I'm not giving 100% to my kids. But then when I'm home and now I'm done working and now I'm with my kids, I'm giving them 100% and I'm not giving work 100%. And I think that that has been the way in which I have found success in melding the two things together over the last 15 years. And I have never blamed myself for working, ever. I've never felt guilty about it. And I actually think that I've been a better role model for my children as a result, and especially for my son, because I think it's crucial for sons to see women who are multifaceted and who can manage a lot of things at one time and can be great moms, but can also go to the office or go up to their home office every day or do a lot of volunteer work. And that's important, because when sons see that, then they take that same amount of respect that they have for their mothers and they transfer that to the workplace, or at least that's what you hope that they do. And so that's really what has been central to why I feel it's so important for me to be a working mom. And also just because I think it makes me a better mom, because I feel more fulfilled.
I agree 100%. And what I'm hearing you say is wherever you are, you're showing up at 100%. If you're at work, you're showing up at 100%. If you're home, you're showing up with your family at 100%. If you're in a yoga class or whatever that may be, you show up yourself, right? At 100%. And that's a huge message out there. And that's our choice. We could be pulling ourselves to pieces, trying to give something of ourselves to everybody, or we could just be where we are and where we're dedicated and committed to be and show up at 100%. And that I love. And I love that, sharing that out there. And as a mother of a son, stop beating yourself up. And I will say, as a mother of a son, I'm with you. I'm with you. And I'm excited to see my son, you know, like year 2 out of college, working for an executive woman. I'm like, yes. And I think because he's had a working mother, he has a different point of view or different experience of what that's like.
Right. And you know, so I do feel that if a woman has a choice to work or not to work, then that's her choice. But for me personally, that's how I've approached it. And for so many thousands of women who have felt guilt, I just feel that it's unfair because men are not asked or judged with the same kind of parameters and questions. So anyway, let yourself feel good about what you're doing and stop blaming yourself. That's my message.
So in wrapping up, share with us a little bit about your documentary, Breaking the Silence. Everybody can find on demand. It was aired on the 14th, and it is on demand. So you guys, me personally, my thought is, hey, let's get a group of women together. Let's watch this together, open up some wine, have some cheese, and really see what's going on in the middle of this world, middle of America, and with all women's stories. And grab it, you know, a group of women, a group of colleagues, co-eds, but take a look at it, share it out there, share it with your friends.
Thank you for saying that. And, you know, also what happened after my story broke at Fox was that I think that happened all across America as we started to get into this cultural revolution, was that a lot of women actually were getting together with other women and finally for the very first time sharing their own stories, because it turns out that almost every woman has a story, unfortunately.
Yes, they do.
And, you know, it happened to me personally, where I had friends call me up and tell me stories that they'd never told me. And so I do think that it whether it's my book or the documentary or any other story you've read about, it does open up the lines of communication for more women to feel more courageous to even share with their friends. And I think it's central to solving this whole issue, because the more we talk about it, the more we normalize it, and the more we don't make it taboo. So, opening the lines of communication and feeling safe to say, it happened to me too, and I'm not going to hide it anymore. Here's what it was. And, I wish I would have said something at the time, but I didn't for whatever reason, but now I'm owning it. And, and I'm going to talk about it. I think that that's how we heal from it. That's how we move past these moments. And that's how we hopefully move into a next generation of eradicating it.
Well, Gretchen, thank you for standing up for yourself, and thank you for being a leader and show women how to stand up for themselves and how we can start doing things differently and start changing the world one person at a time.
Thank you so much for having me. All the best.
Subscribers, listeners, remember to subscribe to Her Success Story for more great stories about leaders in all walks of life and how we could learn from them and take them into our own lives. See you next time.